Okay, we are recording. This is the Kubernetes SIG Network meeting of Thursday, April 19th, 2018. So first thing on today's agenda was to talk about KubeCon, the upcoming KubeCon EU. I had one topic to talk about there, but I suspect we also just want to cover who's going to be there and what opportunities we have to meet up. So I wanted to ask, I'm actually not going to be there myself, but we have been asked to give a very brief SIG update on May 1st. So I was hoping we could find a volunteer who will be there to give that update to the Contributor Summit.
I'll be there if no one else is. Although I was reading the email and noted that it said they only want updates that affect on issues that affect the other SIGs. I'm not sure if we're really doing anything that affect other SIGs.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't spotted that comment.
Anyway, if no one else is volunteering, yeah, I can do it if we figure out what needs to be said. So we still have a week and a half.
Oh, wait. Just ping it on chat. Okay. I think I know what's wrong.
We can hear you guys now if...
Oh, you can hear it? Sorry.
Yes.
You hear us? We're having a little AV issues. Minhan will also be there, so he can help out.
Yeah, so...
Cool. Would someone mind writing down notes as we do them today, just so we can keep track of what we said? Cool. So that was my only topic for that section, but somebody else had added the question.
I'm actually the one who added the item to the agenda and didn't have any specific questions, was just sort of wondering if there was going to be a update or anything, but I guess it's way too late for us to schedule that anyway, and we didn't before, so there isn't one, right?
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. Usually I would have done that, but I missed it this time because I was not attending this one, so it kind of dropped off my radar. All right. So if people are going to be there, let's schedule maybe an informal meetup on the mailing list or something like that. Moving onwards, next was the SIG test review. I took a look at this just a little bit ago and tried to summarize where we are on that in the notes. So I think there are a couple things that need investigation. So maybe we can spin through those and see if anybody is already aware of them or on top of them. Starting with the GCE IPVS tests.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Rohit. We're working on it. I probably gave the same update last week, but it's still a work in progress.
Cool. As long as it's being looked at.
Yeah.
And then we had a pair of probably related, the kube proxy upgrade and downgrade daemon set tests are both seeming to fail in the kind of setup phase. Is anybody looking at that?
Let's take a look. I think the node upgrade itself is failing. Like it's really not like kube proxy is failing. So I'm not sure if there's anything we can do. other than waiting for folks to fix the upgrade test.
Are we, hello?
Oh, hey, we can hear you.
Okay.
I just take a look. I think the node upgrade is failing. Like it's not really the kube-proxy daemon set test is failing. Like other than like waiting for the other folks to fix the upgrade test itself, I don't think there's much we can do here.
All right.
It's weird.
It's,
Cool. Just noting that down. Next on the list was the kubeadm Calico test, which I don't think have ever passed the cluster turn-up stage. So I'm not sure who. I'm also getting a lot of echo. Okay, that sounds better. Yeah, I'm not sure who actually owns that one. I don't think it's me, but I'm happy to look at it. I think if we can't get this working in the next meeting, we should just get rid of it because I don't think it's adding a whole lot of value. But I will set aside some time, or anybody else who thinks they own that, come chat to me and we can figure it out. So we had two kind of flaky suites, but looking into them, it looks like they are mostly SIG CLI failures and our tests are passing. And then there's one GKE test, which I've marked as blocking because the SIG release dashboard marks that one as blocking. So my understanding is for the GKE one, someone on the Google side has to be looking at that. Hello? Somebody's talking. I don't think we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So it's Sihong from Google again. It is actually a new test we added to the latest branch, and we found out the issue is some internal bug in GKE, and we have a fix open and hopefully get that in place in a couple of days.
Oh, sorry, I was muted there. I think that I think that covers it as far as tests go. Next on the agenda was Francois, who was looking for validation on the core DNS cap.
Hello. Yes. So we already talked about that last week. What happened now is, okay, this cap is ready. I've been reviewed since last comment of last week. What we need now is, I guess, an approval. I know some already have already approved. I guess the big approval will be the one of Tim, I guess. He's not here this week. I would like that we okay with what's inside, and then I would like to go ahead, and I have PRs waiting. My issue is very, very slow to go to have the PR check-in or merge or even reviewed. There is one on the auto-scaling for the DNS auto-scaling that has to be extended to work with core DNS that will help to have the end-to-end test completely run for core DNS. Then I will have I need this first one to get in first. Second one is the perf test that was asked to be extended. That is the criteria, the gate, I mean, for the approval, not for the approval, but for the for the feature to get in. The PR is already out since 1 week. And then I will have to have this PR on core DNS. So my question is, how do I do to push these PRs? Mostly I tried to push Bowie. I don't know if Bowie is on the line here.
Sorry, I was on vacation, so that might be why.
Okay, that's why. So if you can look at least at these 3 PRs and the one you can approve, including the CAP. If you're okay with the CAP, please approve.
Yes, I will look at that. Yeah, just send me an email so it shows up on the top of my list.
Okay. So one thing that will happen, this core DNS GA is planned for v1.11 based on the old feature mechanism that was open 2 months ago, or no, 2 quarters ago. One thing that will happen, and we talked a little about that last time, is if we want to verify that all the criteria will be good for GA, we need to commit at least this second commit core DNS default with kubeup. That means we make kubedns default at least for a while, so we can verify the end-to-end tests are running. The scaling, the end-to-end test scalability for 2,000 or 5,000 nodes run only with code that is check-in, does not run on PRs. So I validate with 100 nodes on PRs, but for the big cluster, we have to check in. So I would like that as soon as maybe next week, as soon as we have the approval, the team can give the approval on the CAP, we check in. So we have at least a bunch of end-to-end tests running with core DNS by default, and we can verify what happened.
Yes, that sounds reasonable.
All right. After we have some, what I wanted to say, sorry, I put that somewhere. One big item that I don't know how it will go is on the graduation criteria. There is the hosting of the image on gcr.io, and Tim started an email thread last week before going to vacation, where he wanted a full organized process to push that image on the Google registration something, GCR, and not everyone is agree on what has to be hosted there and how to make the things. So that feature will be maybe the long pole for core DNS. But I would like as soon as possible everyone push on the PR or the reviews, so we can go ahead and we have only that long pole that is really the thing I should focus on. I can just share my screen on 1 second so you can see what is the schedule, in fact. Okay, share screen, sorry. So if I show you here, that is the planning of this release. So everything is in yellow is PR and can be merged as soon as someone review and agree. This long pole in red is the image hosted on gcr.io. I don't know at all how long it takes, but as soon as it is done, I need to update all the kubeup, kubeadmin, minikube. So really we take core DNS from this image. So as you can see, the schedule is short. So I need everything else happen during that time. So please push on the PRs. Right. Everything that is yellow or orange is the code is ready, but the PR is not pushed. We are blocked by something else on kubeadmin.
Colors.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
But if we can go ahead with the yellow, that will help. And I think I would like to have something check in beginning of next week or during next week, so we can test the end-to-end scale. All right. Okay. That's all what I have to say. So thank you, Bowie. If you can, I will send the email, and if you can push on these PRs.
Thanks. That's a nice timeline that you got there. Appreciate that level of planning. Paul, you're up next for IPv6 DNS failures.
Yeah, so I've been looking at IPv6 and seeing how, with an IPv6 cluster, how some of the tests are running. And one of them that we're hitting a failure on was the DNS for services test case. And I came across Francois' PR that was making changes for that for core DNS. And so he separated things out into v4 and v6 test cases, and we sort of found out that it works with core DNS and it's failing with kubedns. And from what I can tell, what's happening is one of the requests where they take the pod's IP address and convert it to a name and then submit that with DIG to be resolved. When kubedns gets that name, it tries to convert it back to an IP address. It tries to convert it back to an IPv4 address and not an IPv6 address. So certainly, it tries to do a lookup of like fd00.77.30. 100. And that just doesn't work.
I think there's actually a bug, like just like a missing IPv6 not supported. So it should be pretty trivial to just fix it, I think, in kubedns.
So I guess that's what the question was: is should we fix it, or should we skip that test for kubedns, or what? Now, I did do some more testing, and there's another pointer probe that they do. So that's one probe that they do for pointer, and there's another one where they take it's like a dotted IP address and try to probe that, and that's failing also. So
that's actually a bug. I think it's been fixed, right? That's the PTR. Basically, PTR record is not working.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not working on IPv6. Yes, I think we should fix my opinion, because the first bug is not so important, but the PTR is more important.
Yeah, we just fixed a PTR bug that sneaked in one of the patch releases, so it may be the same thing, but definitely those two is on our plate to kind of go and resolve.
Okay, so how should we sort of disposition this? Should I just skip the testing of that for now until the fix gets in, or?
Yeah, if it's possible to use that feature label to just skip it for IPv6, and then when it's fixed, we'll just you have an issue open for those two, right?
I haven't created an issue for this particular thing yet. I can do that though.
Yeah, that would be great if you could have the issue and just send it to me, and then we have to fix those anyways. I think those are just bugs, or IPv6 was not supported.
That's a kubedns issue, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's working with core DNS just fine. So.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. I think Mike's next. We wanted to talk about Pod Ready ++ interactions with network policy.
Yeah, I just occurred to me as I was trying to think it through that this thing is going to be really expensive to implement. Has anybody implemented it?
Pod Ready ++ or
specifically
Pod Ready ++ for network policy?
Yes, specifically the network policy part.
So, Minhan, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So I think there's an email thread going on in the SIG Network group, and then I think Mike Express's question is particularly on how to implement network policy. How to basically make network policy like into the Pod Ready ++. Is that the question, right? That's what you're trying to ask. So I think there's a response from Tom Scrafton regarding they already have similar constructs in Cilium where they consider both cases, where it's per pod whether the related policies are enforced, and then per node whether on that node is already completed all the like programming for network policy. So but they haven't like hooked it up with Pod Ready plus, obviously. So any other like other questions or whatnot? Why is it like hard, or what is it different? What's not enough from Pod Ready plus for no policy?
Right. So I haven't had a chance to read Thomas's last reply. But the difficulty is that there's just a lot to quantify over. So the relevant network policy objects for the readiness of a given pod, well, you realize in a network policy, it refers to objects pods in two different ways. There is policy object has this pod selector that kind of high up in the structure that selects pods that it applies to, and then it has a bunch of rules, which in turn can have more pod selectors or address selectors or node space selectors that select other pods, and for this policy then affects traffic between those two pods. So to find all the relevant network policy objects, you have to consider both ways that a network policy object can refer to a pod, and you have to test whether all the relevant network policy objects have been implemented. And that's a lot of network policy objects, potentially. And it seems to me that will involve a lot of work to basically control work.
So all the problems that you just mentioned is caused by the label selector, right? The implicit membership of pod and network policy objects, right? Because you say all of it is caused by label selectors, so it's an existing problem for both. So, or for anything that relies on label selectors to group like members, like services or network policy. Right? This is an existing problem. So one solution, right, that like in the Thomas Grafton points out is based on like the policy version where everything becomes flat. You flatted all the network policy versioning into a single version, and then you just double check if that version is the latest, right, across all the nodes or and whether they are implemented for all the pods. Right. That's an implementation detail. What Ready Plus Pod Ready Plus gives you is an extension point, right? Is an extension point for external systems to influence the pod readiness, so that you get workload. So you make the workloads aware that okay, there's an extra feature that relying on the pod readiness. That's it. But how you figure how that information is feedback into, it's depending on each feature or whatever implementation detail that is behind it.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow the last remark. Clearly, there's a difference, a separation between things that contribute to Pod Ready ++ and things that consume Pod Ready ++. My concern here is things that contribute, specifically the network policy implementation, how to make it contribute correctly to network to Pod Ready ++.
I guess just as a point of clarification, maybe I missed something basic. Are we discussing whether we need to change Pod Ready ++ in some way to support network policy, or how do we get network policy to be usable with Pod Ready ++?
Primarily the latter.
I see.
Well, I'm starting there. So yes, how do we implement the aspect of Pod Ready++ that it refers to network policies? So can you, I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow the remarks about how to actually do that. So there was something about flattening something I didn't quite follow.
I mean, again, this is an implementation detail on like what exactly you. So okay, like underneath you need some kind of aggregation, right? You need to add some aggregation to get global knowledge for whether a certain network policy is already implemented across the cluster, right? You need an aggregator. That's the minimum, and then that aggregator gets the global knowledge and then inject the pod conditions, right? So that it's influencing corresponding pods readiness.
So
okay,
first off, I'm assuming here
mm-hmm.
that in terms of pod conditions, we're talking about one pod condition that reflects network policy implementation.
Yes.
Okay, so the setting of that condition for a particular pod depends on enforcement that's done adjacent to that pod and adjacent to every pod that one might communicate with.
Yes.
So it depends on the implementation of both the network policy objects that select that pod and in their high-level pod selector, and also the ones that select that pod in their ingress and egress rules.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we're talking about a set of network policy objects. So
there are two sides, right? There's an egress rule that is corresponding to the pod, and there are ingress rule from other potential receiving pods, right?
Go on. Yes.
Right. So you need to collect both of them. So basically, the egress rule can be collected just from the node that is running the pod itself, and the ingress rules needs to collect it on all the nodes, right?
It might be simplest if we just focus on the ingress rules in network policy. I think that's enough to illustrate the problem. So for
okay, just to simplify, the egress rules is very simple, right? Because only depending on the network policy implementation, but most of them will only implement the egress rule on the node that is running the pod, right? So that piece is simple. You only need to retrieve it from the node that is running the pod. But for the ingress rules, you can't tell, right? It's all over the cluster. So it has to be aggregated across the cluster.
I don't know that the statement about egress is necessarily correct, because when a new pod launches that is selected by an egress rule, that means policy needs to be updated across the cluster to enforce that.
Right. So my suggestion was, let's just forget about egress for a moment. We have enough complexity to talk about with ingress. Once we've settled ingress, we can come back to egress.
So I guess I don't get why you're so concerned about all of these specific XY pairings. Like at some point, your implementation, whatever it's doing, has to have applied all of the rules that matter. And that's really all that matters. Like you can say the pod, like once you have updated the network to reflect all of the currently active network policies and all of the currently active pods, then you can say that the pod is ready. And
that's, yeah, that's a little more than necessary, but that would be a way to do it. I mean, that's asking a little too much, right? Because pod ready ++ is specific to a pod. So it would actually be wrong to insist that all the network policies are implemented. You must check whether all the relevant network policies are implemented.
Well, I mean, if your network policy code is written in such a way that it is thinking about individual pods, then it's already thinking about individual pods, and so you have your answer. And if your network policy code is not written in a way that you're thinking about individual pods, then then there is no better answer than the pod is ready when the whole network is ready.
Yeah, the thing is, I'm also a little bit confused as to why this is becoming overly complicated. So to my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, when I go to deploy a pod, right, I can determine from the labels on the pod at that particular time all extant network policies that select that pod. I can then resolve, as part of bringing up that pod's networking, whatever sorts of filter rules have to be applied to the traffic allowed in, the ingress traffic, and the traffic permitted out of that pod. And so I literally, as a matter of implementation, could simply choose not to return that CNI call until I actually have done the right things in terms of making sure the correct policy for that pod being brought up at that moment are implemented.
So I'm just saying, remember that there are two static places in the schema for network policy where pod selectors appear. And maybe you were thinking about only one of them, but I'm concerned.
I was thinking about both of them. What I'm thinking about is where they get applied, which is if you choose to apply your network policy by restricting the permissible ingress and permissible egress from a particular pod, then the point at which you have a single point of control around that happens at the time of deploying that pod vis-a-vis the network policies known at that moment.
I don't think that's necessarily true.
How so?
The launching of a new pod could trigger new rules that need to be programmed on existing like pods in the network, right? So say you have a pod that has an egress rule that allows to some selector. As soon as a new pod is launched that matches that selector, whatever is programmed to the data plane may need to be updated in order to allow access to this new pod.
Yeah, no, there are a number of things that could happen implementation-wise, right? So I'm not claiming that this will be true for all implementations. What I'm claiming is there is a clear manner in which this could be implemented that makes this problem very simple.
I see. So as a meta level bit, it sounds like this is like worthy of a doc or something in which sort of get our best minds together and work out, what the problem space is and the solution.
Yeah, I think we're probably not going to solve it here, but I see it as an important thing to get to the bottom of and convince ourselves that there's a workable solution here. It's kind of partially see it as a proving point for PodReady++.
Yeah, Mike, I think since you started the email thread, maybe you would be happy to take the initial stab at the doc.
Yeah, tell me again, what are we trying to do in this doc? I don't have a good solution, so I'm not going to be able to write one.
Yeah, so I think maybe just put the problem, and then it sounds like a bunch of people have various different solutions that they have in mind, and then it would be clear for the community to say, oh, well, does this make sense or this makes sense? Not make sense.
Okay, sure. I can have a doc. I'll write the problem statement and let people put in various solution approaches. I think I understand what Casey outlined, but maybe I'll let Casey, actually write the description. If you want, or Casey, I could try to write it.
Yeah, I'm happy to add to that doc with the concerns I've got.
Okay. Where should we put this doc?
Make it world or link. Just send it to the mailing list, I guess.
All right, sure. I'll just create a Google Docs doc and send a pointer to it.
Cool. So the last thing on the agenda was something I added kind of in haste, but I figure we should start thinking about our goals for the 1.11 cycle and make sure we've got them clearly defined. And there are a couple requests for updates on some feature issues, which until we think about what we're going to do in 1.11, we can't quite answer. So I don't know what the best way to do this is, if it's on this call or through some some other mechanism. Maybe we should start just by looking at what we wanted to do for 110 and seeing where we got to with it. Is that something people would be interested in doing on this call?
Let's do it.
All right. I'm going to share my screen. Right here. So I think this is the most up-to-date view of what we set out to do in 110. So perhaps we can just kind of spin through them and make sure they're in the right state.
Could you make the font just bigger?
Yes. Maybe. How's that?
Thanks.
So the first one here is IPv6 support, where we set out to get CI implemented. I know there was a branch with that, those CI changes on it. Did we ever get that merged, Paul? Or was that you?
That was me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a PR. It's been out for review for 2 weeks. I've been going through hashing through a bunch of changes now. I think it's close, but it's not approved yet, not merged yet. So I don't know if it's qualifies as being. It has a chance for being declared ready for 1.10. We might have to push this into 1.11. Still hoping that it gets merged before KubeCon, but we're just waiting for approval and merge now.
Right. Cool. So I think that puts it in that category.
Yep.
We wanted to have a proposal for supporting multiple pod IP addresses. I don't know that was actually started. I don't think I've seen it.
So is that actually looking at supporting the IPv4 v6 dual stack case? Because I think that's the simplest case for dealing with there, and it's probably best not to overcomplicate beyond that.
That was the intent, I believe.
Yeah, I think that was the primary driving kind of use case for it.
Okay. That makes sense.
That all would have been fleshed out in the proposal. So we got input from the community on ingress, so that's done.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to write something sometime next week. I think Tim put something out as well, or did he? But basically, start something on the mailing list with a doc to get people's feedback.
Yeah, so we can, I think we should define what we want to achieve in 1.11 on this, where maybe it's
like a proposal.
Summarizing that into a doc or a proposal, yeah. We wanted to make the v1 beta 1 network policy API read-only. I don't remember seeing that happen. So unless anybody can correct me, I'm going to put that as not started.
I think that's right. I'm not certain.
We wanted to get core DNS config parsing done, and I think we did.
Yes. It was done for the release. I don't know what you computed here. 1.10 is the one that is pushed already, no?
Sorry, what was the question?
I mean, I don't know, you are filling the column current status, but it was done for the release of this 1.10.
Yeah, I think the current status is just within the 110. This is in the 110 feature section.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to fill out the status at the end of the release, I guess, as a counterpart to target end of release status. We wanted to decide and document the GA criteria for the IPv6 key proxy. We have a KEP for that now, but I don't think it has been completed in that it's not merged yet. So I think we can only mark that as started. And we wanted to have a draft proposal of topology-aware routing of services, which I know is out there, but I believe the last discussion on it was we should put this on hold. So that looks correct. And then down here were some things that we had talked about, but decided, whoa.
Just quick comment. Are we gonna track the pod ready plus here? I think we should, right?
Yes, we probably should. Plus, and I guess our target here was agree proposal. And we're kind of at this state. So it looks like there's a bunch of stuff that is not quite done, which will probably carry over to 111. And then a few things you marked as done where we need to decide what the next steps are. So if we just pop over here. That would have been nice to copy the whole thing. So do we want to, I guess, go through these and decide what we can do in 111? So Dane, I'm guessing this is going to come in pretty soon, and then we'll probably have a secondary goal for IPv6, or perhaps that will get kind of wrapped up in the support multiple IP addresses.
Yeah, I think we should start looking at the dual stack requirements, and I think that'll drive the multiple IP spec, multiple IP per pod. So I think we should at least come up with a design spec for dual stack and start working on the multiple pod IP part of it, and possibly the multiple service IP part of it as well.
So, question, since this is all being driven by IPv4 v6 dual stack, wouldn't it just make some more sense to track it as v4 v6 dual stack?
You're saying combine it, the multiple pod IP with just dual stack?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially just a how do we get to the implementation of that? So why not just track it that way?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. There was probably one use case for multiple pod IPs that Mike had presented that was outside of dual stack, but I think it makes sense to just combine these two.
Yeah, I think we were going to try to just focus on the dual stack to begin with.
Okay.
But I guess maybe the issue is we wanted to, be aware that we have other ambitions as well. So we'll keep I hope we keep that in mind as we work on this.
Yeah, I think your concerns were with like the OpenStack cloud provider plugin addresses, and I think we're going to have to think about that for dual stack anyway. It'll provide v4, v6, and probably some other kinds of addresses. So.
I was referring to the work on multiple network attachments. That's also going to lead to a different kind of multiplicity. And I was hoping we could do something that works with that as well as dual stacking.
Yeah.
But that may be just getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. I was going to say that's going to add a lot of complexity, and we should probably just focus on the multiple pod IPs and then expand that to the multiple network afterwards.
You mean start with the dual stacking?
Yeah, start with a dual stack.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's what we agreed.
Yep.
Cool. So I've updated that just to explicitly call out dual stack as the use case there. I think the target is still agree that the design for that.
Mm-hmm.
Future of ingress, I think we just said we want to propose the future. Oh man, my keyboard is not. Okay. That is not started officially yet. This is one we hadn't started. Do we still want to do this?
I mean, I assume we do eventually want to get rid of the beta version, so that's probably the right first step. So yeah, I think keep it.
Cool. Goals for core DNS. We are, sorry?
So this time it's to go GA, so that means by default. The goal is to have all the end-to-end tests running, the perf test, and after be, how do you say, default in the deployment tools like kubeup and kubeadmin.
Yeah. I'm just going to fill that in like that for now. That has started. GA. Decide and doc GA criteria for IPVS. I think that will probably come in soon because we got the KEP outstanding and people are reviewing that. So we'll probably want to pick some subset of what's outlined there in the graduation criteria to work on, but I don't know that we can define that just yet. This guy, does anybody know what the state of that is? Like what would be a reasonable next step? I haven't thought much about this yet. Is anybody on the call looking at this or working on it?
I don't have the screen pulled up. Which one are you referring to?
Oh, sorry. This is a topology-aware routing of services.
Oh yeah, that thing's been open for quite some time, and I think it's kind of get bundled into that big router issue for future of a bunch of things that Tim was working on.
Yeah, so maybe we
definitely not an owner.
Drag this down for now. And Pod Ready plus plus, I think we're gonna probably agree that, or should aim to agree that early on in the cycle and have time to do, perhaps get started on implementation of that. So I guess that would be.
So the first PR is out, but it's waiting for review from the Node team and the API machinery and SIG API machinery. So and I consulted with the SIG node because most of the changes are kubelet changes related to the pod status manager. It's very hard to feature gate, so they basically recommend the changes to be beta grade, at least like to be production ready. So
is that, would we still mark it as alpha, but just know internally that the changes are pretty good, or?
Because it's very hard to feature gate it. It's basically changing the status manager. Yeah, so it basically needs to be like production ready.
It seems to me there's at least one bit of staging, or at least one staging thought that's relevant here. So in the Pod Ready plus plus proposal, we're talking about introducing a new pod condition that mirrors the existing ready condition, and then changing how the existing ready condition is set. We could do the first before the second, and in some sense it seems like that would actually be necessary.
Yes.
So this simple, I don't understand a simple scalar alpha or beta question here. It seems to me like we have two stages to roll this out. So the discussion should be clear about those two stages.
You mean the stage one is to have a new pod condition to mirror the existing one, and the stage two is to change the existing ready condition to reflect ready plus plus. Is that your suggestion?
Yes. Actually, let me add one more thing, right? Stage one would be add the new condition plus update the schema so that the set of feature gates can be listed. And then stage two, once we have controllers actually setting the feature gates, stage two would be to update the way the existing condition is set. Maybe that's not necessary. I guess.
Yeah.
I guess we could do it in one swell swoop because we would. It's only controllers that opt into affect it, and so they'll be ready when they're ready. So I guess we don't really need two stages.
Yeah. So basically, if there's no readiness gate, then it's basically working as intended, just like
Working as present.
Yeah, well, working as present, right? So, so if any controller actually uses it, then it will take effect because of the status manager part is already production ready, is production grade, so it just has to be, yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, I think we are just about out of time for today. This is a helpful start. And if anybody has anything else that they want to propose, let's bring it to the mailing list or the next meeting. Cool. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye.